words of introduction for,
oh, please,
not
yes.
for the old timers, but for newcomers and so forth.
Uh-huh.
So just give me it won't take long.
Help yourself.
Okay. Okay. I'm Mark Renwick. I'd like to welcome everybody to the July meeting of the First Coast Free Thought Society. We are an organization of free thinkers, atheists, agnostics, humanists, and others who promote science, reason, and compassion over dogma, faith, and belief in the supernatural. You can learn all about our activities at our meetup page, which is easy to find at meetup.com/First Coast Free Thought Society. Looking ahead to next month, in August, our speaker will be Carolyn McClanahan. Her topic will be the crazy soap opera of healthcare reform. Carolyn is a medical doctor as well as a certified financial planner, and that'll be next month. Some logistics tonight. For those of you using Zoom, you're invited to submit comments and questions in the chat window. There will be plenty of time for Q&A tonight. During the presentation, please keep your microphone muted. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted to our website. This evening's speaker, Shelton Hull, began writing for FOLIO Weekly in 1997. He has been writing about cannabis issues for FOLIO for the past 2 years. In addition, he writes for Void, J Magazine, and Orlando Weekly. Shelton is also a regular contributor to First Coast Connect on WJCT-FM, and he is a former candidate for Jacksonville City Council in 2011. Let's welcome Shelton Hull. Take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Shelton Hall. Thanks for tuning in. Nice Monday afternoon. I'll be watching wrestling later. That's another thing. Well, I guess there's not so much of a presentation that I have here. Just I want to offer some general words explaining how the cannabis market has unfolded and evolved here in the state of Florida over the last few years. It's been a long, ongoing process, one that really kind of only accelerated over the last 3 to 5 years. I remember there was a group called the Cannabis Action Network back in the day that they were doing medical marijuana petition drives for going back to like 1994. At least 94, of course, was when the Proposition 6, I think, out in California. California was the first state to legalize medical marijuana in its era, and throughout the 90s, a number of other states, including Washington State, Colorado, did the same in a very lower scale, but somewhat similar process to what we've seen in the recent years. But then that ended in I believe, early 2001, when President George W. Bush became president. He hired John Ashcroft, a former governor, former senator from Missouri, to be his attorney general. And under Ashcroft, they basically continued. This is something that feds still always have the option to do. They, even in states where it's legal or decriminalized, they have the option to go in there, especially if there's anything going across state lines and such. So the states appealed, defendants appealed those convictions, those arrests on grounds that it was legal in the state. And eventually in 2001, the Supreme Court essentially ruled that federal law, that when there is a conflict on the matter of cannabis between federal law and state law, federal law, FBI, local police, etc., the federal prerogatives will prevail in that situation. And that, I believe, is still essentially the case in America today, although it's not been really challenged. There hasn't been a court case that I know of that's made it all the way up to the top to overrule that. So it went back to zero, went from 7 or 8 states, I think, medical marijuana in 2001. Florida never had, and then they went back to zero. In the state of Florida, we've never had a successful petition drive until probably 2016. 2014, when it first got on the ballot. No, it was 16. But first, the state legislature kind of changed the law to impose a sort of supermajority of, I believe, 60% something to pass pass a ballot initiative as opposed to the former simple majority of 51. So the medical marijuana thing back in 2016 was polling ahead of what it needed. Very similar to how legalization polls in the state now. So they knew the numbers were essentially there, and it was flooded. The state was flooded with a bunch of ads paid for by a fellow named Sheldon Adelson, who is heavily invested in Las Vegas and various things like that. Power broker. Odd that he personally intervened in that way, but lots of money was paid for basically commercials with the lady in a doctor's coat saying, "I'm a doctor," and so you shouldn't endorse this medical marijuana thing. It's dangerous. It's just an actor playing a doctor, but that was like very, very low in the fine print. So instead of it was polling above 60%, it ended up with, I believe, 57.5 in 2016. So it went back to ground zero. And as you know, whenever you want to do a new ballot initiative, if it fails on this particular election, you can't really roll those signatures over necessarily into the next petition drive. So they had to do it all over again. They got it up. They got the thing on the ballot, and this time it passed easily. I believe 68, 69% back in 2018. So medical marijuana was the law. Hello? Sorry, hit the wrong button. Medical marijuana was the law of the land in Florida beginning in early 2001. And that, I'm not 2019. Was it? No. I get the numbers all screwed up. There's so many ballot initiatives and things like that now. But it's been about 3 years, since 2017, really, that the medical marijuana thing's been going. And, revenues have basically doubled each of the last 3 years across the nation, and particularly here in Florida. No one's really seen any statistics about retail sales or anything like that in Florida or anywhere else here in 2020 during the pandemic. I think by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year this year, September 30th, we're going to see a lot of really interesting accounting gimmicks happening with corporate America across the board and every industry, particularly, I would say, most likely some of these major medical cannabis firms here in the state of Florida, because it's a business model that is really predicated on constant growth, steady growth, like, not to call it a Ponzi scheme or anything, but, the intent is the market now is, maybe $50 million a year statewide. It's been estimated that if it were fully legalized, which they were trying to do this year, if it were fully legalized, it could be drawing upwards of $1 billion just from the state of Florida within 3 to 5 years. Essentially, we're talking at this point a matter of exponential growth. In out west, California, Washington State, and California collectively are, between the three of them, are putting in over $1 billion in federal income taxes and business taxes just off of their cannabis market. So that shows a little glimpse of where we can be at moving forward. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. The plan was to get that up and running by the beginning of next year, but that fell through. So they're hoping to maybe get it back on the ballot or get it on the ballot in 2022. The numbers were there this year. They needed 766,000 signatures by February 1st in order to qualify for the ballot. So that's a process that, they think in February 1st, you'd want to give yourself at least 6 months to go through all that, because you have to get every individual signature, you have to get them verified. There's all types of third-party vetting that goes on. But what happened was there was one organization, I get their names confused, they're essentially the same. It was a more citizen-based ballot initiative. And they started up, kind of very grassroots, but one of the provisions in that piece of legislation as they proposed it was to allow for home grow, allowing for citizens in Florida to have it not only legal, but to be able to grow their own supply in their home or, wherever. The industry, the major suppliers We've done, last estimate I saw was about 50,000 pounds of cannabis in the state of Florida sold just so far this year. That's just January through June. And that's with numbers perhaps down, perhaps up. You get different responses from that. But the major suppliers, they did not like the idea of home grow. They thought it represented a challenge to their profits. So they started their own group, their own ballot drive. So instead of having one group that's working together across the state to get that done, you've got two groups. They're competing for the same signatures. So, and people didn't know there were two initiatives. Someone would sign one somewhere and then not sign it the next time, or not sign the other one because they think it's the same thing, or they don't hear of it at all. And as a result, they fell far, far short of their numbers. I mean, millions of dollars were put into this ballot initiative drive, and I know from my position working at FOLIO, I never once heard from any of those groups. I had to go out and find them. There's no one sent me a press release or anything like that. Some guy asked me to sign his petition, when I was in St. Augustine one day. That was the first that I knew of that there was a petition drive at all. And this is probably September, October of last year. So they're way, well far behind on what they need to be. You'd want to, if you're doing something like that, say you're running for office or you're doing anything that involves a big petition drive, especially with something like that, you'd want to have people full-time walking up and down the beaches or the shopping districts, your downtown art walk type things, the little plaza thing in St. Augustine, and up and down the state from Tallahassee to South Beach. You'd want to have people out on the campuses. You'd want to have someone at least one person each local college campus, just collecting signatures there. And you have to get more than you think you need because there's a lot of redundancy. You'll get people signing twice because they don't post twice. That only counts as one. And so they fell far short of the numbers. And as a result of that, full legalization, responsible adult use, as they call it, will not be on the ballot in 2020, which is unfortunate. I think we can see from the way things are looking right now, it's going to be a pretty substantial liberal turnout electorally. And of course, it was polling well ahead. It only needed 61% basically to pass. And most regional polls had it going at 67, 69% statewide, obviously, by city level, and across the state. So that was an easy win that was just missed out on, just because of interpersonal disputes among a small handful of people, cost our state potentially $1 billion in revenue over the next 3 or 4 years. Because now if it happens, it's going to be 2022 before that gets done. There's a lot of other states pushing to do it ahead of time. So by the time it passed to 2022, Florida would still be well behind, fairly easy to catch up. And now the question I always have when I look at all these little state initiatives and stuff is, why don't they just go for it on a federal level? Why not decriminalize? Because under the current law, federal law kind of trumps everything, so to speak. So if they just wrote it off, the swoop of the pen, then all the other states could pretty much follow suit, which is something that they would want to do. Oddly enough, Trump is fairly liberal on the matter. He said, offhand remark at a press conference, a little press gaggle a couple of years ago, that if legalization of pot was if the bill was put on his desk, he would strongly consider signing it. He had his former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who was a heavy opponent of cannabis, and under his term as Trump's first Attorney General, really pushed hard to reassert federal law and federal jurisdiction over a lot of the state markets, especially in terms of like banking and commerce and such. But Sessions, for other reasons, ended up being marginalized and run out of the White House. And since then, Trump has had very little to say on the subject. He's very strong on opioids. He hates alcohol. He doesn't claim to have never drank or anything. But on this subject, he's actually fairly liberal, perhaps more liberal than many past presidents of both parties, which could in some ways be expected because he made his bones in New York in the 1970s and 80s, which was always, New York's always kind of a little more just liberal on social matters. So right now, going forward, it's a stalled out year. There are a lot of big things planned for the market, as with the cannabis market, as with so many other industries in this country, but it was all sort of swept off the table by this situation. The upside, you can't really compare. Can you all still hear me? Wave your hand if you hear me. Okay. You can't really compare the sales figures now to sales figures this time last year. Number one, because you can't get hold of the figures, which is a common problem these days. And number two, because we don't know how the market could have grown had this stuff not happened. I know that many of the major dispensaries, even some of the ones that have, they all have millions and millions of dollars of venture capital vested in them. A lot of them get that money before they've even really opened that many storefronts because the model seems so porous. I know down the street at my house, I live over in Riverside in Jacksonville here, and just down the street, there's a big red building in the corner in 5 Points that was supposed to be MedMen. The owners of it used to be the old Vans and Stoves market, which I think moved across Womack Street. But MedMen have been in there for gotta be over a year now, renovating and doing construction. It was supposed to be open. They came in, they cleared it out, they put newspaper up so you couldn't see inside. It was supposed to take, they were looking at having it open by the holidays, definitely by Christmas time. It's July, late July, still not open. There's no talk, no one's even talked about it. They bounced their CEO. You always have little corporate shakeups whenever a business, starts having trouble. Some investors will want to pull out. Some, you might want to make some changes in the leadership. That's kind of, it's like the quarterback. You're the one that's going to get sacked. So you're calling the plays. If it fails, it's on you. So we've had those sorts of corrections. We don't know. Well, I don't know what's going to happen next. I think the overall thing I'd say about the cannabis market in Florida is that the status quo of last year prevails and everything's cruising along as it stands. We have about little over 300,000, maybe like 315,000 or so individuals with medical marijuana cards in the state of Florida. So you think about that. You go to a doctor who's licensed to prescribe it. And there's 2,400 of those, almost 2,500 doctors licensed to prescribe it in Florida, and you get the recommendation from them or the prescription, whatever. Then you fill out your application, pay your fee, which is about $100. So 300 plus thousand people times $100 each per year, that's money going straight into state coffers, which is one reason why Nikki Fried has always had pretty much free reign in her role as Secretary of Agriculture to regulate that industry and in some ways really define the parameters of that industry. And DeSantis hasn't really made any moves to intervene or step into her territory in terms of policy, even though they're in all kinds of disputes on other matters, like the mask thing and all this stuff. But on that matter, we seem to have pretty much bipartisan consensus on the viability of the medical marijuana industry, the question of full legalization, you know, you won't have another chance to get on the ballot until 2022, and odds are that they will have those same issues. You know, they'll find a reason to split unless there's someone, you know, like a John Morgan or somebody who has just a ton of money and can say to them, look, I will bankroll this thing, but you guys have to all work together. You can't be splitting your energy and splitting your resources in that way. And so if they can do that, it will pass. But in the meantime, there's always the possibility of doing you know, the legislative route. You know, have someone propose in the state house, run it through there, run it through the state senate, and then get the governor to sign it. You know, three big issues with that. It's like, number one, both houses of the state legislature are controlled by conservative Republicans. So most of these bills aren't, you know, people propose bills, you know, there's bills to this effect in every state house and sitting in Congress, sitting in the Senate, but those bills don't get out. When you have control like that, those bills don't get out of committee usually, let alone go to a full vote. You know, same in the House, same in the Senate. You know, so it's much more likely to be voted up by the people than to go through the legislative route, because DeSantis wouldn't sign it anyway if it passed. I don't know if we've had a governor who would have signed, looking back. I mean, maybe Bob Graham or Lawton Childs or something like that, you know, but by and large, no. As far as Jacksonville, I'd say, sure. I think that, you know, I can totally envision a scenario where the city of Jacksonville, the government here, basically decriminalize cannabis at some point in the next like 2 or 3 years, perhaps. Yeah, I'd say that come 2021, once this national election is over, I can see that, you know, moving out of the way, because, you know, one of the big appeals to that argument has always been the fact that it represents a savings on police resources, manpower, financial power, bed space at the jail, all this stuff, which is an even more tasty argument to make now at a time when, you know, official like infrastructure resources are already stressed to the limit. You know, you know, they're doing a lot of overtime, a lot of late nights. So, I mean, all other politics aside, I think anything you can do to like just give people like a little extra time, you know, to me, that's the job of government. The job of government is to make sure you have an hour to spare to have dinner with your kids, you know, that you can go and do things like that. And, you know, and at times like these, that's a strong argument to make. And that's an area where the leftward flank, you know, liberal Democrats, progressives can find common cause with a lot of libertarian conservatives, you could say. Another area, of course, is, you know, military policy, overall war policy. You know. But on this area, all aspects of civil liberties, something like, oh gosh, maybe 20 million, you know, we've spent on that just in this city. You know, that's just booking fees, bail fees, you know, manpower for the, you know, for the officers, you know, the cost of bail, cost of legal fees in the courts, salaries of the judges, and all that, you know. I mean, there are cities in this country that have hundreds, if not thousands, of untested rape kits just laying around, you know, but they got like vagrants sleeping in the jail when the vagrant should be like in some kind of mental facility, or they got somebody like locked up for, you know, because they got a joint in their pocket or whatever. Meanwhile, the next Bin Laden is running around doing God knows what, you know. And I think, you know, one unfortunate silver lining to this whole unfortunate situation this year is it's made us all kind of just think a lot, like a lot of like heavy thinking people have had to have this year. lot of thinking about logistics, a lot of thinking about, their relationships with their families, their relationships with their offices, the business models of whatever industry they're in, thinking about the things that really matter. I'm a supporter of the cannabis. It's funny because I've smoked several joints in the course of my life, 3, 4, 5, gosh knows. But I've done actually almost none since I've started doing this column. I get oversaturated with just the talk of it. You all know, you've all been to dispensaries. It's like going to like a craft beer place. There's like 20 different things there, and it's cool. It's cool that there's a lot of things, but still at the same time, there's a lot of things, I didn't know how specialized the strains can be, how heavily it's been, pushed in that way. And I think that one good thing about the fact that it's not been fully legalized is that it's sort of pushed people more towards seeing all the fun alternate uses of it. Things like butters and like just edibles and tinctures and oils and the vape pens and stuff. So it really allows people to customize and specialize what it is they want, for themselves and what their needs are. The legalization or the medical marijuana movement in the state of Florida is driven heavily by seniors. We have a heavy senior community, of course. We have in the veterans groups, particularly in the state, a couple groups called Buds for Vets and Weed for Warriors. These are both groups that if you're a military veteran, you can go to them and they will set you up to get your medical marijuana card at no cost of your own. And I think they've done that with a few thousand. Now, of course, if you're active duty, you cannot partake because active duty military are federal employees, and federal law still precludes them. But it's really helped a lot of our veterans, and now as the door gets open for more consumerism of it, we're finally getting some better answers as far as academic research on the subject. Now, for the first time, colleges and universities and research facilities are really able to look into that for themselves without worrying about getting in trouble. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Shelton.
Okay, I had to take off.
No, you're fine. Do you want to take any questions during your presentation? We had a couple people that raised their hands and
I'd love to. The more the better.
I think Harvey, if you're on, I think I see your hand raised. Or actually, he may have stepped away. Susan?
I had a couple of questions. One of them was, why did Councilmember Dennis's, he had a bill to decriminalize marijuana and it failed, and I was wondering if you know why and what we can do if he puts it forward again to help get it passed, because I agree that we're wasting a lot of money. I mean, not even, of course, the human cost, but wasting a lot of dollars as well, just jailing people for a small amount of possession. I was wondering how we can, of course, these people that refuse to wear masks are, they're awful and they're mean, but how can we kind of challenge what they're doing and say, hey, if you're so afraid of wearing a mask, why don't you, if you're worried about freedom, why are these laws against cannabis, which is harmless, why aren't you speaking out against those instead of masks, which actually can help prevent the spread of the disease? So I'll let somebody else ask a question, but I have two more if I get another turn.
Oh, you'll have all the turns you like. But It's a good question. Let me start with the Garrett Dennis thing. Basically, the Garrett Dennis bill failed because of personal issues between Mr. Dennis and Mayor Curry, pre-existing issues going back over other things. And as a result of that, the odds of it were not great under any circumstances in that council, but because it was him, a lot of people were not able to sort of speak out in favor of it. Dennis told me that Melissa Nelson and Sheriff Williams were both in favor of his proposal, but they weren't willing to publicly say so, for fear of agitating the mayor. So, I mean, now, maybe if Dennis is the next mayor, then maybe there's more of a chance of it. I think what's more likely to happen with this particular, on the local level is, and this is what I've advocated to Mr. Dennis, who I wrote about in the FOLIO a little while back, basically that he should just hand that legislation over to another member of the council, someone who's more, someone who doesn't have baggage with City Hall, let him just stand back, be a co-sponsor, let someone, I could totally see someone like Matt Carlucci taking that up on behalf of Garrett Dennis, and
what about Becton? Becton was one of the ones that said he didn't like wearing a mask, freedom, everything. Joking.
Well, yeah, I'd like to talk to them, but they're not wearing masks, so I can't talk to them. It's very difficult, gosh, when you shake as many hands as I do every day, like you want people to wear their mask. It's very odd. I think, Hazouri, Carlucci, those are the only people that I know well enough personally to speculate that they might be willing to take up the mantle of something like that if offered. But Becton is someone who is talked about as a potential mayor coming up 2023. It's only a couple of years away. Curry is term limited from running again, so we're going to have the mayor, sheriff, the tax collector, the property appraiser, all 19 city council spots, all coming up for grabs at the same time. And I'd say if you were a member of the city council and you wanted to really sort of establish yourself some progressive credentials and get yourself some little outside attention, outside money, taking that Garrett Dennis legislation and pushing that up again in another council session, which I believe they'll be legally able to do in probably about 6 months or so. That would be a great way to get your name out there and sort of establish yourself early on in the mayor's race. So someone will do that,
Thanks, Shelton. Anyone else have any questions they want to ask before Susan gets to ask her other questions? I guess take it again, Susan.
Hello, we got somebody here with a question.
Okay, my name is Ben Edmondson.
Hey, Ben.
I was wondering about the thing with the madmen.
Yes.
Are they going to open? What's your opinion there?
I don't know. It's kind of suspicious that particular location hadn't opened. It was slated to be perhaps the biggest dispensary in terms of square footage in Jacksonville, if not the state of Florida. That Old Fans and Stoves place was massive. We're talking about, like a third of a football field, if not bigger, in terms of the size. The company has some larger issues. There's disputes with one of their executives was pushed out. There have been changes on the board of directors. And I think that maybe the failure of that one to open is one of those things. It could be like a Star Wars thing, like the Riverside Medman is the Death Star. And, until they get the thing open, Darth Vader's just going to be choking people left and right. Because like I said, they're supposed to be open by the holidays. They missed out on the whole Christmas run. So I think that what's happened with them is that, they might have bit off a little bit too much they could chew in terms of finances, because I don't, and with a lot of businesses like that, they have to do a lot of extra work to get it ready, get it up to speed. You have to install like security doors and like all kinds of like bulletproof things, and you got to put in an ATM. A lot of these places, some of them have like armed guards on the premises and things like that, because there have been issues. So I can understand doing the, dotting your I's and crossing your T's on the preparation, but it's very weird that it hasn't opened yet, and no one's really talking about it. No one's really answering questions about it.
Would it be because of the failure of the legalization, recreational?
That is pretty much how we thought about it at Folio. Yeah, I think you're right. That's the best theory I've heard, because they were expecting it. And at times they were doing these things. So there are new places opening up in Jacksonville so quickly. Like at one point, like in 2019, especially like summer, fall 2019, literally a new thing every week, sometimes two things a week. It's very difficult to keep track of sometimes, but then that has kind of ground slowly. And then, so between that and the financial hit from the COVID-19 thing, and depending on who the investors are, who knows what's going on with that. Now there's a large dispensary that opened out at the beach. They're called One Plant. Now the beach, not far from where the old Freebird is. They opened up late February, early March, out there at the beach, right, like literally weeks before the lockdown happened. And they seem to be doing okay. So the Medman thing surely relates to larger issues with the company itself, rather, and the financial and the sort of the cash flow stuff, than it does with any particular issues with the building that they actually put that one in. Now, yeah.
Well, I heard that in the beginning they were going to be the biggest retail marijuana store in the Southeast.
Yeah.
So that they'd get a lot of mail order business, so that could be a thriving operation.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would have been that particular building, that would have been potentially $1 million company. Just that one particular location, it would have been a definite hub and a boost to the local economy. As I'm sure there's a time when, gosh, upwards of a third to a half of the businesses on the 5 Point Strip were on, pretty much closed, just empty storefronts. Now they're pretty much full capacity. The only thing I can think of now that's not open is maybe Derby House and the Medman spot. So it's but that's the legalization thing. Like, why? I don't understand why the people who wanted to get that thing on the ballot failed to make it happen. It's like, I don't care. Like, if you give me $5 million cash, I will get 766,000 signatures. Even if I have to walk up and down the beaches by myself and take Ubers all over. Like, when you're talking about that much money, that's your, like, how do they let a potential $1 billion operation fizzle apart because like 10 people don't like each other?
Crazy.
It's a mystery to me. Mm-hmm.
I think Linda has a question, or she has her hand raised.
Linda, hello.
Here, Linda, let me unmute you.
Okay, did that work?
Yep.
Hello.
Okay, so I was wondering if you have any thoughts about the structure that Florida, the vertical structure that Florida requires, where the growing, processing, and sales all have to be done by one entity.
Yes, I mean,
That's the complete reverse of what they have in Washington State, where they have them all separated, which to me works much, much better.
sure. I mean, if you're advocating for the free market, if you want the free market, let the market be free.
Yeah.
First of all, greetings to you and everyone at the International Space Station. I hope you're having a good day. Now, as far as the vertical integration, it's one of those things that those conditions were figured into the initial ballot language when it went up in 2018, because as before, that was funded in large part by people connected to industries that were going to sell it.
Right.
And the key with the vertical integration thing is like, it raises the threshold for startup capital to a point that most potential investors are priced out.
Right.
Unless you can get a gig as like a side owner of something, but to own all that, it's a thing. I've heard rumors of like, you'll have sort of basically third party vendors that are running their own grow houses, and, a couple of companies will just buy into it and sort of to evade it that way. But and it's the people on, sort of lower level consumers, folks that aren't super wealthy in that movement are opposed to vertical integration because it prices them out of an ownership stake in it. And then on the other hand, you got someone like Ron DeSantis, who has always been vocally opposed to the vertical integration model and has, sort of like pushed for his own people in the state legislature to find ways to get that out of the way, because he doesn't like that it creates a monolithic structure of vested business interests that can function as a well-oiled lobby. He doesn't mind the people, he doesn't mind medical marijuana and whatnot existing, but he does mind the creation of like, a new large liberal constituency that can, push policy decisions, against him. For example, the felons, the thing like where felons were given the right to vote, like, that right being restored, that particular thing would not have happened had the medical marijuana thing not been successful 2 years before. That was one of the first major, progressive-based citizen initiatives that actually made it through that whole process, thus showing that it was possible. And the thing with the ballot, with the felons, that's even more difficult. That's an even tougher sell. Somehow they're able to get a little bit of bipartisan support for both. It's worth noting that, Amendment 2, which gave us medical marijuana back in 2018, that passed by about 68, 69%, which is more than most elected officials have done. I can't think of a governor that's ever got pulled 68% in a contested election, definitely not fairly, so that has and the way people have been trying to get this done for many years now around the country, and there's always major resistance, even among liberals. It's been often said that Democratic presidents, like Lyndon Johnson and Bill Clinton and even Obama to a certain extent, pushed the drug war as heavily and sometimes heavier than Republicans did. You look at the 96 and 94 crime bills under Bill Clinton that Joe Biden played a big role in. A lot of the mass incarceration problem in this country is based on these drug war protocols. And it's not a racial thing, just so much a racial thing. It affects communities of all types. You look like the opioid crisis is more of a white person thing, but it's another tragedy where there's so many people out there, they're in positions where they can't get help even if they want to get help. People that can't get help because they don't know that they need help. people that don't get help because they don't want to have to be forced to snitch on somebody or be accused of, don't want to call the police and say their friend is overdosed because they don't want to get caught with anything on them, And we're seeing now, I think we've seen this year that these, we're getting a taste of what matters and what doesn't matter on our personal level and also in terms of policy, I think. I mean, hell, we haven't even heard there's been very little terrorism. I know that the usual hotspots and the global conflicts are happening, but numbers are down. Like there's a lot of quiet where there is not quiet, most cities around the country saw like a pretty sharp drop off in violent crime, particularly homicides, during this initial 3 months or whatever, 3-4 months of this COVID pandemic. Some places like, Miami, I think Miami went 6 weeks without a murder for the first time since the 80s. Chicago went like a whole weekend without a shooting. And it was like, is incredible. It was like the Cubs won the World Series or something. The only city where we had an actual increase in like the heavy crime during the pandemic was Jacksonville. For no obvious reason, So yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. Who's next? Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, we got a Harvey.
Harvey? All right, Harvey, what's up?
Mm-hmm. Harvey, I'm going to unmute your line. Or maybe he stepped away again. We'll get him back one time.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Susan, if you want to...
Harvey can't be stopped. Yeah. Is it done or not?
Okay, well, I'll ask my question then. Are you ready?
Yep.
My second question was, you'd mentioned veterans getting medical marijuana, and I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that. Like, are they getting it as a group differently than other people? And is it mostly about PTSD? And, Councilman Rory Diamond has his group, Canine from Warriors, and read some information that's not really proven to help the Canine for Warriors, that they're doing some studies on it, and it's not really helping with PTSD any more than having like a regular dog. Because his dog, get one, it's like $20,000. And I was wondering how much is cannabis helping vets with PTSD, and is there evidence? And if yes, to that question, is there evidence to prove it?
Well, I mean, with something like that, it's hard to measure it effectively. You can give someone cannabis and then measure their heart rate, measure their pulse, measure their brain waves, measure their cardio and whatnot. You can draw their blood and take a look at how it affects them on a physical level. But the psychological thing, the PTSD, it's a strange thing, particularly as it relates to our veteran community, because number one, it takes a special kind of person to go out there and do that kind of work anyway. I think the stress that doctors and nurses are going through right now is really extraordinary. It's like the firefighters after 9/11. Like people are, I heard about one nurse, like I think she was in Italy. She got sick, so she couldn't work and she couldn't help people anymore, so she killed herself. That kind of thing is, everyone has sadness. We all have a certain amount of darkness that we have to deal with. I know I have it in my life, but thankfully there's no football season this year, so it won't be that bad. Not having to watch the Jaguars will make me feel a lot better, I think. But a lot of veterans say it does work. We have thousands of veterans out of 300,000 people with the medical card in the state of Florida. I would estimate that easily, 20, 30,000 of them at least are veterans. They were well ahead of it, and they say it helps. And PTSD isn't one overall thing. So you'll have PTSD perhaps coupled with a traumatic brain injury or a history of concussions, or PTSD from the war coupled with the stress and the trauma of dealing with life after the war. I've always said the problem in this country isn't drugs, it's depression. And there are a lot of people that are very depressed. There's a lot of mental health issues in this country, and a good amount of that is natural. I couldn't tell a veteran how to handle their problems. I've heard those nightmares. I had a friend that was in the Navy. He came back from the war. We were sitting in a coffee shop having coffee. Riverside, one of the medical helicopters. I think St. Vincent's is right over that way. A helicopter came flying over, and the helicopter came in kind of low because it's 5 Points isn't far from the hospital. And as soon as the thing went over, he jumped down and crouched underneath the table. It was shaking. And I feel anything within reason that could make someone in that situation feel even slightly better, even think that they might feel better, let them have it. Let them have it. It's, there's bigger things to worry about right now. Now there's some people have claimed in the veterans community and otherwise that it does help with issues like that. In our state, the criteria for being prescribed medical marijuana is very open-ended, shall we say. You'd really have to almost go out of your way to not get approved, because most doctors, the doctors who sign up to do it, the 2,450 as of July 1st in the state of Florida, they're prescribing, each of them went to the state to get certified. Each of them paid money to get certified. Each of them went through some training or whatever to get certified. There's business costs and stuff like that. And apparently there's a lot of pressure from the broader medical community against some of these doctors that are out there prescribing, because it being Florida, the first thing you think of is the pill mills from back in the day, which were a real problem. People moving those, opiates out the back door. That, that would create some natural skepticism of any venture like this, and it's certainly a fair concern. But they compare it to, they say it works with PTSD. Things here you can get certified for is, chronic injuries, arthritis, cancer, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, depression, bipolar, PTSD, all kinds of things. Because these doctors, they get into it because they want to write these prescriptions. I don't think anyone pays the fee to get certified for this and says, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and pay X amount of money and sit in this classroom today so that I can maybe prescribe that to somebody one time at some point. Anyone that goes in to do that, they probably got the list already in their mind. They've probably already had patients that they've talked to. They already know who needs it and what, and as we see, doctors and nurses will go the extra mile, It'd be nice. I'd like to see nurse practitioners get certified for doing that as well. I'm not sure if they are or not. Is Harvey there?
No, I think we lost Harvey altogether. I know. We got a.
Did the rapture happen? We lost Harvey. Goodness.
All right, Jessica.
Yeah. Hey, when you figure out how to unmute, can I ask Sheldon if he's going to write for Folio again now that they're running?
Yes, I will. The new issue of Folio came out last Wednesday. So you can probably find it right now at all the regular places you would see it at before. They've gone to a monthly publication schedule, which means, you know, it's not going to be there out there every week right now as people were used to, but the issues that do come out, they're going to be, you know, thicker and like, it looks really good. John Phillips has assembled a great team over there. And of course, we're going to be active on the, you know, the internet, World Wide Web, or whatever they call it. I did, in the current issue, the one that came out last week, I wrote about just a little update on the, kind of similar to what we've been talking about today. So I resumed the cannabis column with them last week. So that was number 125. So we'll be continuing on with that, and I'll be doing all kinds of things. So I'm a freelancer, so the busier, the better.
I wanted to piggyback off of what Susan said.
Mm-hmm.
So she mentioned the PTSD. I was wondering how much of the studies right now are actually basically returning back to the doctors and seeing if there is counseling that can corroborate PTSD improvement. You know, so if you're looking at it in synergy with healthcare, you're looking at it in mental health care, obviously. And so I'm curious in that regard. Now we're not talking about like the physical aspects of the benefits of cannabis, but strictly dealing with PTSD and counseling, how that is quantifiable improvement, like looking at it by, you know, is the state, is the Department of Agriculture, are we going back to doctors and counselors to find out if there's improvement with patients, and how that works within, you know, interpersonal relationships that the patients have with those they are, you know, dealing with in their lives?
Well, as far as, you know, the industry in general, I don't think there's any kind of systematized approach to follow up in the manner that you're suggesting. I'm sure that individual professionals in that field are keeping studies of their patients. There have been, you know, a few research papers, few universities and whatnot have done like minor, you know, sort of smaller scale studies on it, you know, more so, but that they focus more so on the physical, you know, tumor growth, stuff like that. There's the question of whether it helps the people with PTSD. I mean, I don't know how you can prove it one way or another. It could be the placebo effect, you know?
Yeah.
If a person thinks that something is wrong, you know, and they believe that they are being given something that will help, you know, if it's something psychological or psychosomatic, then there is some possibility of it. It's like George Costanza always used to say on Seinfeld about, well, not always, he said it once. I say it all the time. He said it once. He said the way to pass a lie detector test is to believe the lie, you know? And he said it as a joke, but that is pretty much true, you know? People go through things, and those are difficult things, you know? I mean, God knows this world breaks people, you know? Especially when they're going out there doing stuff like that, you know? People have been victims of like sexual assault and rape, domestic violence, child molestation, child abuse, you know, people that have, you know, survived plane crashes, people that were in war, you know, maybe someone that wasn't even injured in war, but they just happened to be somewhere where something happened, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go by some crime scenes sometimes, like you'll see, or accident scenes, like when the cops are crying, you know it's a bad thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like anytime you've got like, yeah, the sheriff of a city or the chief of police, you know, shedding tears at their press conference, you know, they can barely get through it, you know? So if it's that bad for the person who has to walk in on it, how bad is it for the person that actually physically survives it, you know? And now I mentioned the pill mills and the opiates thing earlier. Another area of anecdotal belief, old wives' tale or whatever, young husband's tale, is that, cannabis has proven effective in helping people wean themselves off of addictions to things like opiates and cocaine and, even alcoholism to some extent. And again, this is just, the only people you hear really saying it are, people that claim that it helped them, or people connected to industries that would benefit from that knowledge being true, like lobbyists for the industry, lobbyists for the medical marijuana industry, or, folks like me who have heard these types of things from individuals directly. And, I've heard from enough of them that I'm inclined to believe it's probably true until I hear otherwise. But at the same time, no one has really gone to the level of doing a full, complete, sort of peer-reviewed, definitive study of this particular question. That's something that the feds would have to do. I mean, we may not really get a real study on these matters that everyone can actually take as gospel, until it gets legalized on the federal level.
Well, with that said, now that, we saw the state of Florida and go over to Israel. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of curious how much information from Israeli studies have impacted now the U.S. knowledge of cannabis, because they had been doing it for quite some time. So we're dealing with matters like PTSD. We're dealing with things that they were quantifying scientifically without the push for lobbying. That information is vital for, legislation productivity here in the States, but also scientifically, just to know, backing the numbers now that it's not scheduled as a level 1 narcotic everywhere. What would that be in terms of ascertaining that kind of statistical information?
Well, I think that some of that is out there already. It would, if one looked up some of the companies that are connected to the industry out there in Israel, you'll see press releases and things like that. There are a lot of companies, like little smaller companies, penny stocks, they call them in some cases, that are connected to the cannabis industry that you can invest in. Companies that are like 7 cents a share, 52 cents a share, something like that. And, you never really, it's like baseball cards, you never really know what's going to spike. But with prices that low, it's fairly easy to be a day trader. Just get a little tiny basket, just spend a couple $100 on some stocks like that, especially if you happen to see them in your community. Now, most of the big names in the business, the names of these companies would not translate to the names you might see on packaging or the names you might see on dispensaries. It could be just something totally ambiguous. That as far as the Israeli thing, not many people even know there is an Israeli thing. No one. That only really came up in the public discussion outside of cannabis circles. The cannabis literature, the cannabis media. Like if you're out on Twitter, especially, there's so much stuff about that subject that's just coming through Twitter and Instagram every day. There are, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people who write about it, or who do podcasts about it, or who do YouTube channels where they're testing the stuff. As far as the Israeli thing goes, the person to ask would be Nikki Fried. I would say that, whenever the Ron DeSantis, that the trip to Israel was, it was kind of a controversial thing. I think most people would agree with me that, I heard about it. I was like, well, that's kind of random, you can go anywhere he wants, but having all those people on that one plane at that one time is really kind of unprecedented as far as certainly around here. Last thing I could remember, the president does things like that all the time, but for the government to take like a full entourage, all these people, and there's some bipartisan personnel on that thing as well. It was very interesting. The closest thing I would compare it to is back in 70s, maybe 73, 74, Governor Edwin Edwards, who was the governor of Louisiana, took I think 150 close political associates, friends and stuff on a trip to, I believe, Paris, and then put them all up in the same hotel and did all that, and gave them bumper stickers. And they say to this day, you can see near certain parts of Louisiana, you'll see someone drive by in an old car that has like a bumper sticker on it that says, "I went to Paris with Edwin Edwards," or something like that. Now, when they went out there, all these people were flying at the same time, but Nikki Fried and her then fiance or whatever, I've never met either of them, so I don't, but they were dating or engaged or something. He was an executive at Sotera Wellness, which is another one of the sort of the top 5 dispensary companies here in the state of Florida. There's a lot of them, especially here in Northeast Florida. You'll find I believe 3 or 4 in Jacksonville alone. Him and Nikki Fried, they went to Israel like a day or two ahead of time. Like they flew in early ahead of the official delegation. So I would assume that Fried is, and now the extent to which, because there's Fried's role as the Secretary of Agriculture in regard to the cannabis thing is kind of unique in this country. Every state that has it decriminalized or has a medical marijuana or allows for permitting and whatnot, they have different departments, different agencies that do it, but most of them don't have the idea of there being an official government figure whose territory encompasses all matters related to this particular thing, Classifying it under agriculture was an interesting approach. It could have been classified under commerce or classified under this or that. And there's certainly very few public officials who are publicly and nationally synonymous with that particular issue. So Florida, I would say that the way she's, and it's not just about her. She came in the same, DeSantis and the Amendment 2 were all passed the same year. So putting her in there, it's kind of one of those, the position wasn't specifically made for her, but she's the first one to do it. So, she's defining the course of it, which I think ultimately I would expect her to run for governor, if not in 2022, then certainly in 2026. But then I could see Lenny Curry doing the same thing, particularly in 2026. But now there's speculation about, there's no, like the Israel thing, it's talked about, but there's never any specifics connected to it, I haven't looked into it that heavily because I'd forgotten about it, But whatever's going on out there in Israel, Nikki Fried would know what it is.
Thanks.
Yes. Carl from Paducah, Kentucky.
Question. Hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
A little bit off subject, but the newest old drug on the market, well, not on the market yet, is psilocybin.
Yes.
And that seems to be working almost miraculous cures for the Ptsd people.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for depression, almost the complete cures after one session.
Yeah, that's
the next thing to come along behind psilocybin.
yes, and again, the veterans community playing a solid role in helping advance that. The psilocybin thing or as I like to call it, psilocybin, because it makes you silly. It's been talked, those benefits to it have been talked about for a few years now. But again, it was really that sort of Iraq, Afghanistan veteran cadre that sort of made it happen. And now just the last 2 or 3 years, maybe, like we're getting some actual, like verifiable evidence and some studies to that effect. I know that there are folks going down like South America, also down in South Florida, Orlando, I think, trying the ayahuasca stuff. Heard of ayahuasca having some salubrious effects for matters related to PTSD and depression, whatnot. Also, MDMA to a certain extent, and those are all different substances. It's not a one size fits all thing, but the microdosing concept has been around for decades and decades. There are lots of people who do that sort of thing. Like I can't imagine. Like I can't. I have a couple of friends that they like to. They used to go and like just do like a ton of LSD and mushrooms, and then go to like theme parks, like riding roller coasters on mushrooms. I cannot imagine that. I mean, it's insane, but some people like to surf and things like, to each their own, I mean, I barely like flying. I have to have like 2 or 3 drinks, like and it's really stupid because I take early morning flights when I do fly. I like to, if I'm gonna fly, I like to fly early so that I can get to wherever I'm going in time to like have lunch or something, hopefully. Yeah.
Well, you can ride the roller coaster on your couch.
Yeah, exactly. So when I'm at the airport, I mean, I'm at the hotel bar at like 6. I mean, at the airport bar at 6 a.m. Doing shots before I board. Just to calm me down. I mean, if yeah. Now, and the psilocybin thing, I don't know. I don't think any state has legalized it or decriminalized it yet, but there are lots of places in this country, New York City being a good example, where even if it's not officially on the written into the law, like you'd really have to really make a serious ass of yourself to draw like the attention of police on like on a cannabis charge or something like that. I mean, unless you're like Kanye West or Alec Baldwin, they'll probably leave you alone.
Are there any other questions? Comments? Yeah, go ahead. I don't know.
Friend Hillary wanted to join in.
Well,
I have a question. I have a question from the floor. How many of you out there have your medical marijuana card or are considering getting your medical marijuana card at some point? Has the talk so far? I know it's been entertaining because I'm an entertaining person, but has it been informative? Have you all enjoyed yourselves? Wave your hands. Give me some twinkle fingers.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Really,
Twinkle
really
fingers. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got Linda has a comment or a question.
Linda, yes.
Yeah, I've got mine. I've had mine for a couple years.
Yeah.
And it's well worth it. Well worth it. As long as you can afford it. It's expensive, but as long as you can afford it, made a huge difference to me. Because I've got really bad arthritis in my knees.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes the difference between being able to sleep and not, and being able to function.
Now, the process, when you're getting your card, did you find the process easy? Was it quick?
It's very easy, but it's expensive.
How much did it cost you, if you don't mind me asking?
I want to say it cost like $150 initially, and then you have to go to then you have to get a prescription, which they charge you like, I don't know, $75 ish.
Yeah.
For something like 7 months.
Hmm.
So it's like, you know.
What's $75 a month for 7 months?
No.
Oh, okay. Now I know that there's
$75 for 7 months worth.
Oh, okay.
But it, you know, as long as you have money, and it's, you know, buying it is obviously also not cheap.
And they're different.
But it's not too bad.
There are different forms. I know that with some of the doctors, I've heard some complaints that, you know, doctors really like sort of gouging on the consultation fees and, you know, the fee to write the prescription. There's a lot of that, especially in the early days in like 2019.
Right.
There's a good bit of that. But now with over 2,000 doctors licensed to do it, it's a buyer's market, really. And so there's no incentive for a doctor to be gouging people. They want to like keep their prices low so they can cycle people through as quick as possible.
Yeah, when I got it, it was early on, and there were not very many of them available. I've already moved on to somebody else who's a lot cheaper. And I think there's people that are even cheaper than that, but this one is convenient to me. But yeah, once the market kicks in, if there's a market, like my brother lives in Washington State, and what goes on there is very interesting. And it's like what's happening here when there was a new dispensary opening almost every day.
Yeah.
That's settling out, and some of them are closing, and some of them are deciding not to open. There was one that was supposed to open on San Jose Boulevard too, which never did.
And that's unfortunate because it makes it look like a plateau. I know that I heard that up in like, you know, Oregon, Washington State, it's super profitable, but there's been a bit of a plateauing effect as far as you know, like the prices per gram have started to shrink down a bit, and they're not expanding as much as they used to, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, the market maybe just
their prices are going way down. Yeah, their prices are going way down because there's competition, and because the people that are selling it understand about marketing and sales, as opposed to what we have, as opposed to the vertical system that we have, where they're just, you know, stumbling around. They don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, and in the early days of like 2019, you know, when Rick Scott was, you know, during the period when Rick Scott was still governor, he was very hostile to that cause by and large. You know, so I heard people, you know, it would take them, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get their card. You know, now that process has been shrunk down to like maybe 2 or 3 at worst. And of course, you know, then there's the vertical integration model, which inhibits the growth of the free market, and it reduces options for the consumer. And then the disastrous failure on this ballot initiative process. Those are several like artificial impediments put on the growth of the industry in this state, you know. I believe like Oregon, Washington State, California, when these things start being implemented, we're all essentially controlled by liberal Democrats. You know, so they went for it as quick as possible. There wasn't a icing the kicker, as they call it in football. You know?
All right, I think we'll have Carrie be our last question commenter.
Okay, well, I confess I've applied. I have been approved. I've got my email, don't have my card yet, and I have not yet been to a dispensary. So I'm interested to know what I'll find there and how I'll know what kind of choices to make. And that's one part. And my second part of my comment is, what do you think effect that the COVID will have on the market for medical marijuana in general?
Well, that's a good question. So far, these first 3 months of the pandemic, the results have been inconclusive. There's not enough statistics to really be sure about it. Anecdotally, I've heard some retailers say the business is higher than ever. For others, like, other businesses are kind of stalling out. We've got things like MedMin, which still haven't opened. So a lot of that, I think, depends on location. If you live in, say, in Northeast Florida, pretty much wherever you live, there's a dispensary within like 5 miles of whatever your location happens to be. And most of them offer free delivery, or like say a $10 flat delivery fee anywhere in the state. You can't get anything over state lines because that gets the feds involved. And I know you don't want any more trouble from the feds after the 80s. Just kidding. But yeah, within the state, you can, and a lot of these companies, they're all statewide, so they kind of have back supply. So if there's something they don't have in one location, they can just mail it to you from the other, or FedEx it, or whatever. And you'll go in, you'll see some flour, you'll see a lot of the market right now is things like lotions, oils, tinctures. Some people like to smoke the flour, just the regular flour form. I think the more popular form right now is the electronic devices, like vapes. Some people use dabs at home, but that's a crazy, which is like, you have to get this big glass contraption, you need a blowtorch and like put the stuff on a nail and heat up this thing and stick your nail down there. And it's just silly. There are, when part of the opposition to this whole thing from the beginning was the idea that, if we pass this, we allow this to happen, we're just going to get a bunch of like crazy kids. They think it's going to be like a Cheech and Chong movie, which what we've seen in Florida and most other states and cities where they sort of moved in this direction is, there's been no spike in arrests. There's been no spike in juvenile delinquency. There's been, no drop in attendance. We've just had, more money, more revenues, more tax revenue, fewer arrests. So far, so good. Most of these dispensaries will have like the same like half dozen types of items available, whether it's the flour or whether it's the oils or whether it's edibles are super popular. Things like butter, and you can get like, well, you can't get beer and alcohol that's spiked with THC in the state of Florida. Other states, like those of you have access to like California, Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, they make beer that's high volume IPA with like that, and it's pretty crazy. You can get almost gummy bears, Alfredo sauce, hand sanitizer, shampoo. If you
LSD tokeless cookies.
Yes, that's right. Hello.
Shelton,
yes.
I thought of another, maybe my dime is still good. Vaping has gotten some real bad press for nicotine.
Mm-hmm.
And how about for pot? And is it bad for you, or is it any kind of vaping that might not be so bad, or because it sure would be convenient?
Well, I'd say fundamentally, anything that involves inhaling a vapor is not good for you. Whether it's smoking cigarettes or doing a dab, or it's but the appeal of, now let's start with tobacco vaping. The part of the appeal of the tobacco vaping was that it allows people to kind of wean them. You still get the nicotine craving, but it allows you to kind of wean yourself off. You think about it like, if you go outside and you smoke a cigarette, you're going to smoke that whole cigarette, So how many puffs? Say 20 puffs to expend a cigarette, right? And that's something you're kind of committed to, Most people are going to smoke half a cigarette, then put it out, That's not what you pay money for. But with the vaping thing, the nicotine vaping, you know, so I'm just every now and then to, you know, control their volume. And it's like, it costs, the products can cost a lot, you know, especially with it being a little bit more of a seller's market right now. Or initially, those prices are coming down, but you could do that and not really, it doesn't have a big smell to it, whatnot. So you had the popcorn, there's talk about popcorn lung. It's still an evolving process of distilling the nicotine from these chemicals, like the process by which they distillate nicotine out of tobacco is the same, essentially the same process by which they distillate the THC and the terpenes and the cannabinoids from the cannabis plant. You may have all heard about the vaping disease that happened last year or early this year. Like a lot of people got sick because of vaping. A few people passed away. That was ultimately connected to, not to the tobacco vaping, but there's like one or two companies that were making THC marijuana vapes. You know, they're out of California using a product supplied to them, I believe, from China, or at least in part from China. It was that one company. So there was nothing about the fundamentals of vaping that led to all those illnesses. It was
the product.
It was poor decision making by a small portion of that market. But unfortunately, that only comes through in the fine print. So it had a kind of negative effect on, the concept of vaping overall. And then the pandemic hit just a couple months later. One advantage of it now is, to vaping from the pandemic is that traditionally, when people smoke, they're going to smoke a joint, smoke a blunt, they're going to pass around a pipe or a bong, all of which are not things that you're really, wanting to do these days. So a lot, so we are seeing people invest in, you can get your little battery, your little base for like, $20 or something. And, the cartridges, you might pay $50 or something for a cartridge, but that cartridge is going to last you for 2 weeks or something, potentially, especially if you're not using it much. So the investment pays for itself. It's over time, and then it allows you to just do it on your own. You can't do it in a car, it shouldn't be like do anything like that. But when you're at home or you're wherever, just, it allows you to do that pretty safely and easily without having to expose yourself to other people's germs. With anything with smoke, this would apply to secondhand smoke. Like if you're just someplace where people are smoking cigarettes, we don't know the extent to which the COVID, whether the droplets can be carried via secondhand smoke. I know you can catch a cold from secondhand smoke. So I figure if you can catch a cold from secondhand smoke, or you can catch a flu from secondhand smoke, then that is certainly a possibility. Those precautions would apply to anything cannabis related as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Shelton.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for all your questions and
indeed
good stuff in the chat.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Shelton. That was very, very much appreciated. You spoke to us back in 2003.
Yes.
And no one's been able to find out what you talked about, but it wasn't cannabis. It was something else.
Yeah.
But nice to have you back.
Absolutely. I have no idea what it was. I'll try to find out. I'll let you know.
All right. Thanks very much, and thank you everybody for coming.
That was very informative. Very informative. And we're really happy Folio's back.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.
Okay.